He heard water running for too long. No tears, no words, no sounds. Just a silent bath behind closed doors. What he saw inside changed more than just the evening. It broke the silence that had been building up for years, and it called into question the line between caring and what you can't want. The sound wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, just a steady stream of water behind a closed door that was usually left open. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't passed the hallway a second time. But something stopped me mid-step, one of those gut-level instincts you don't argue with. The clock in the living room read 9:47 p.m. The house had already settled into its nightly quiet. My husband was in the garage tinkering with some old speaker system. Our dog was asleep on the couch. And Alec, his son, was supposedly in the bath. He liked long baths, said it helped him decompress after school. I tried not to intrude. I wasn't his parent by blood. I wasn't even sure if I was allowed to care the way I did. Still, something about that sound felt off. It had been running too long. No splashes, no shifting, just water. I knocked once, then again. Alec? Silence. I knocked harder. Still no answer. The door was locked. That was new. Alec didn't lock doors. Not when he was in the shower, not when friends came over, not even when he wanted privacy. He always left it cracked open just enough to let sound through. I stared at the doorknob. I should have walked away, told myself I was being paranoid, but my fingers had already found the small pin above the door frame. I clicked the lock open and eased the door in. He was in the tub, knees pulled to his chest, hoodie on, soaked. His head hung low. The water had gone still, lukewarm, the kind of cold that crept into your bones slowly. He didn't look at me, didn't blink. I didn't ask questions. I didn't make a sound. I just sat down on the bathroom floor, back against the door, legs bent, hands resting against the tile. I made sure not to look at him directly. Minutes passed. 5, maybe more. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was loaded, like something wanted to be said, but didn't know how to form into words. Then I heard it. Software, barely a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. Those 7 words didn't hit like a confession. They landed like exhaustion. Not the kind you sleep off, the kind you bury until it becomes part of your skin. I stayed quiet, not because I didn't care, but because anything I said might have made him disappear into himself again. Right now he wasn't hiding. He was breaking. And I didn't want to be the reason he stopped. So I stayed. Not with answers, not with advice, just presence. Alec didn't move for a long time. When he finally shifted, it was only to pull his sleeves down further, like he was trying to hide the fact that one of his hands was shaking. He said nothing else. I eventually stood, grabbed a towel, placed it on the closed toilet lid, and whispered, "I'll go make some tea." No reply. But when I left, he didn't stop me. And I realized I wasn't afraid to leave him alone. Not because he was fine, but because I knew he'd seen I wasn't going anywhere. When I returned, the door was cracked. Alec was out of the tub, towel around his shoulders, water dripping from the cuffs of his sleeves. He looked like someone who hadn't come to get clean, but to disappear quietly. He took the tea I offered, held it with both hands. I couldn't tell Dad. He wasn't looking at me, just watching the steam rise from the cup. "You don't have to tell him," I said. "Not unless you want to. If you ever do, I'll help." His shoulders dropped, not in defeat, in relief. Then came the question I didn't expect. "Why are you being so kind?" I answered without thinking. "Because I've been where you are, and someone stayed." He didn't speak again, just nodded, sipped the tea slowly, like it was something to hold on to. We didn't talk about school, or why his sleeves were wet, or what had driven him to sit motionless in cold water. That would come later, or maybe not at all. But I knew something now that I hadn't understood before. He wasn't just hurting, he was drowning in silence, and he needed someone to sit with him in it. That night, nothing was fixed, but something had started. The next day passed like the night hadn't happened. Alec came into the kitchen around noon. No eye contact, no awkwardness, just a quiet presence. He poured cereal, scrolled his phone, mumbled something about school starting late tomorrow. I didn't press him. I didn't ask about the tea, the hoodie, or the tub. He didn't thank me, and I didn't expect him to. It felt like we had made an agreement without words. Don't ruin the stillness with questions. Later that night, we watched TV together. Something old playing, volume low. I sat at one end of the couch. He sat at the other. Neither of us really watching. He fidgeted a lot, tugged at his sleeve, picked at the seam of a cushion, glanced at me, then back at the screen. I recognized the signs. Something was building. 10 minutes in, he finally spoke. I'm not confused, you know. I muted the TV. He wasn't looking at me. His voice was even. I know how I feel. I just don't know if I'm allowed to feel it. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew how easily one wrong word could turn honesty into regret. He turned his head slightly. His voice dropped. When I touched your hand that night, I didn't do it by accident. Silence wrapped around us again, but this time it felt sharper. I know, I said. His jaw clenched. Do you hate me for it? No. He looked at me then. Really looked. Like he wanted to believe me, but was bracing in case I lied. But I do think you're hurting. And when people hurt, they sometimes reach for things that feel warm, even if they're not meant for us. He blinked slowly, like the words were landing slower than they came. I wasn't trying to. I know, I cut in gently. You were just trying to feel safe. His breath caught. He didn't speak again for a while. The TV flickered on the screen, muted and irrelevant. I don't know where I fit anymore, he whispered. At school, they say I'm broken. At home, I pretend I'm fine. I feel like I'm acting in every room I walk into. You don't have to act with me, I said. Not here. He didn't answer, just stared at the blank screen, jaw tight, hands buried in his sleeves. Does my dad know? No, he said quickly, then softer. And I don't want him to, not yet. I nodded. That's okay. He hesitated. Would it be easier if I just didn't talk about it? That would be easier, I said, but not better. He let out a breath that sounded more like a surrender. I just wanted to feel okay, he said, barely audible. I know, I replied. So did I. His head dropped slightly like he couldn't hold its weight anymore. And just like that, the wall cracked, not collapsed, not shattered, just cracked enough to let the truth breathe. But truth comes with weight, and some parts of it don't just land, they stay. We didn't speak the rest of the night, but when I stood to go to bed, he didn't move. He just stayed there, staring at the muted screen like it held something safer than real life. And I didn't ask him to leave. I didn't ask anything at all. If you've ever held something back because you weren't sure where it would land, comment, I never said it. Because sometimes silence isn't fear, it's survival. It was Tuesday night when the shift became impossible to ignore. Alec was sitting on the living room floor, back against the couch, legs pulled in like he was trying to take up less space. I was on the far end trying to focus on my laptop, but the air between us felt different. Not heavy, just loaded. He'd been quiet all evening, more than usual, not withdrawn, more like bracing, like something inside him was moving too fast to keep hidden much longer. I've never told anyone, he said suddenly. I looked up. Told what? He hesitated, then, that I like guys. I didn't say anything, not out of shock, but because I knew the courage it took to form those words. He continued, voice steady but low. I knew since I was 12, maybe younger. I just didn't think it would matter until it started to. I nodded. It matters, but not in the way you're afraid of. His jaw twitched. You don't know what it's like at school or online. Every time I speak, I feel like someone's waiting to twist it. I know what that feels like, I said. He glanced at me. Do you? Not exactly the same, but enough. He shifted, pulling his sleeves over his hands again. I thought if I kept it inside long enough, it would just go away, that I could fake it, pretend I didn't see people the way I do. And how do you see people? A pause, then he met my eyes. Not like friends? The room contracted. He wasn't talking about them. He was talking about me. I never meant for it to be you, he added quickly. It just happened. I wasn't planning it. I exhaled slowly. Alec, I know it's not okay, he said before I could finish. I know I'm not supposed to feel it, But it's not a phase. It's not confusion. He stood up, paced once, then stopped. That night, when I asked to stay in your room, I didn't ask because I was scared. I asked because I felt safe with you, and that messed me up. He laughed once, short, hollow. You made me feel safe, and I didn't know what to do with that. I stood now too, slowly, carefully. You're not wrong for wanting connection, I said, or comfort, or to feel seen. He looked down. But I reached for the wrong person. No, I said. You reached for someone who didn't push you away. That's not the same as asking for something inappropriate. A beat. He was still, arms crossed tight. But you felt it, he said. That night, in the silence, when I touched your hand. I didn't lie. Yes, I felt something. His eyes flicked up. So then what does that mean? It means we're both human, I said. It means sometimes pain distorts connection, turns it into something it wasn't meant to be. He shook his head. But I didn't imagine it. You looked at me like... He didn't finish the sentence, and I didn't let him. I care about you, Alec, I said, but not like that. I care because I see how much you're caring, because I know what it's like to feel invisible in a room full of people. But what if I wanted it to be more? The question stopped everything. Not because I hadn't expected it, but because it deserved an answer that didn't leave scars. I took a breath. Then you're brave for saying it, but I'm not the person to give that to you. He turned away sharply, shoulders tense. I let the silence settle. I'm not rejecting you, I added. I'm setting a boundary, one that protects both of us. His voice cracked. Feels like the same thing. It's not. Rejection is saying you're wrong for what you feel. I'm saying you're allowed to feel it, and I'm allowed not to act on it. He didn't turn around, but I saw the tension in his arms loosen. After a long pause, he spoke again. Are you going to tell my dad? Number, that's your story, not mine. He finally turned back toward me. I don't want this to ruin everything. It won't, I said, unless we let it. He didn't say anything else that night, just nodded once and went to his room. The next morning, the space between us was quiet again, but not broken, just different, like a thread had stretched to its limit but hadn't snapped. And for now, that was enough. If you've ever stood at the edge of something complicated and chose honesty over comfort, comment I didn't cross, because sometimes real care means knowing when to stop walking. We didn't talk for 2 days, not because we were avoiding each other, but because there was nothing left that needed to be said. Alec moved through the house like he had before, quiet, composed, guarded. But something was different now. Not in what he did, but in what he didn't do. He didn't retreat. He didn't flinch when I passed him in the hallway. He didn't shut his door all the way. He didn't pull back into himself like I half feared he would. There were no more late-night visits, no shared silences in the dark, no accidental touches waiting to be more. But there was presence. I caught him humming in the kitchen once, low and offbeat. A few days later, I heard him laugh, really laugh on the phone. He didn't see me watching. I didn't interrupt. Just let him have that moment without explanation. It was enough to know the weight had shifted. Saturday morning, we both reached for the same cereal box at the same time. Our hands bumped, and neither of us moved away immediately. He looked up. We didn't speak, but I saw it in his eyes, relief. Not because I touched him, but because I didn't treat the touch like something to erase. Later that day, I found a folded note on the table. One line in his handwriting. Thanks for not making me feel broken. I kept it. Still have it. Because that sentence did what hours of talking couldn't. It told me he understood. We weren't trying to fix what had happened. We were just trying to carry it with less shame. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, not to check anything. Not out of insecurity, just to look. To see the man who stayed. No guilt, no questions. Just stillness. I whispered, I'm still here. Not for Alec. Not even for my husband. For me. For the version of myself I'd nearly forgotten. Someone who didn't run when things got complicated. Someone who didn't confuse being needed with being chosen. The next week, Alec asked if we could repaint his room. Said he wanted to make it feel more like his. I said yes. We spent hours scraping old paint, arguing over colors, finding rhythms again. Not like before, but with more ease. He played music while we worked. He talked more, laughed more. Not once did he bring up that night, and not once did I feel like he had to. Closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a quiet agreement. We understand each other now. Let's move forward. That's what we did. A few weeks later, I overheard him telling someone on the phone, "Yeah, I'm doing better. I've got people around me now who actually see me." He didn't know I was listening, and that made it matter even more. There was no dramatic resolution, no final speech, no emotional breakdown followed by applause, just life. And that was the point. Alex stopped trying to disappear. I stopped waiting for something to go wrong. And in that space, we rebuilt something better. Not friendship, not family in the traditional sense. Just two people who chose not to let one vulnerable moment define them. If you've ever found peace in not crossing the line, comment still here. Because healing doesn't always come from walking away. Sometimes it comes from staying just far enough. Fall came fast. Mornings were darker, nights cooler. The rhythm of the house shifted without discussion. Doors closed earlier, conversations ended sooner, but the air between us stayed calm. Alec had started walking the dog in the evenings. At first it was 15 minutes around the block, then 30. Then he began leaving his headphones at home, letting silence stretch longer than it used to. One night he came back and sat across from me at the table. "They backed off," he said. I looked up. "Who?" He shrugged. "The ones at school. I think they got bored, or someone else became more interesting to target." "I don't know." "You think it's over?" "No," he said, "but I'm not shrinking anymore. That's different." I nodded, unsure what to say that wouldn't sound like praise or pity. Then he added, "I think I stopped needing them to understand." That landed. We didn't talk much more that evening. But the way he said it, steady, unapologetic, told me exactly what I needed to know. He wasn't surviving anymore. He was reclaiming something. A few days later, his dad mentioned Alec had asked about therapy. Not a long talk, just a quiet question over lunch. "Do you think I should go?" he'd said. I told him yes. Not because he was broken, but because he deserved tools to stay whole. He booked the first session himself. Progress doesn't always look like declarations. Sometimes it looks like autonomy, like choosing to get help before someone tells you to. After his second session, he came home, grabbed a soda, and flopped onto the couch next to me without a word. "How was it?" I asked. He shrugged. "We talked about stuff." "Stuff," I repeated. He smiled. "I didn't cry this time." I raised an eyebrow. "That good?" "Maybe, or maybe I'm just out of tears." He didn't sound bitter, just honest. But then he added, "She said I confuse comfort with connection sometimes, that I assign meaning to things because I want them to mean something." I didn't respond. Then he looked at me and said, "I told her about us, about everything, and she asked me what I thought it meant." I held his gaze. "What did you say?" I said, "It meant you saw me when I needed it most, and that was enough." That was the moment, not because it changed anything, but because it confirmed we'd already changed. He no longer carried it like a wound. He carried it like a story that didn't hurt to tell anymore. After that, things got easier. We weren't fragile. We didn't walk on eggshells. We teased each other again, watched dumb movies, shared meals without tension hiding in the space between bites. Sometimes I'd still catch him looking at me longer than necessary, but there was no weight in it, no question behind his eyes, just history. He never tried to reopen the door we'd carefully closed, and I never gave him a reason to. A few weeks later, he brought someone home, another boy, tall, kind eyes. They didn't hold hands, but they didn't have to. It was obvious. Alec introduced him as just a friend. I didn't question it. I just shook his hand, offered him water, and left them alone in the den. Later that night, Alec knocked on my door. "Was that weird?" he asked. "No," I said. "Not at all." He hesitated. "I wanted you to meet him first." That meant something. Not because I was his father, not because I'd earned a title, but because I'd stayed when he needed someone to stay. That night I slept well. No anxiety, no waiting for sounds in the hallway. Just peace. Because sometimes peace comes not from fixing everything, but from knowing you handled one impossible moment exactly right. If you've ever turned a fragile truth into a quiet strength, comment "It didn't break me." Because some stories don't end with closure. They end with growth.